found in a world of his own with his music. Yoste is a musician based in Brisbane, Australia, who is finding his way to the United States in 2023 for a November tour. Playing first in Chicago, Yoste will perform in 8 cities, San Francisco being his last stop. One of the many songs he'll play is a new one entitled I Don't Wanna Lie, a personal favorite of mine that I'm excited to explore. Thank you so much, Yoste, for joining us today and AwareNow, for taking this time and to share this space to have a conversation. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's get right into it with this. In Vino Veritas. In Vino Veritas. Latin translation. Oh yeah, I'm dedicated. For those who don't know, the Latin translation of In Wine There Is Truth. But beyond being swirled in a glass or poured from a bottle, truth can be found in scars. And in your song, I Don't Want to Lie. Here we find truth about injury, stitches, and scars. So please do share, what is the story behind this song that you co-wrote with Vandalux?
Well, besides the fact that I just love Vandalux's music and he happens to be an incredibly lovely guy, that's the why I collaborated with Vandalux, but the why of the song. And I've chosen to lean into this as hard as I can because I normally hate talking about anything to do with the background behind songs or even expounding on the meanings of the lyrics. But I've decided, because I find it uncomfortable, I'm just going to lean into it, at least this one time. I was talking to my dad actually yesterday about this very topic, which is, I was just asking him about if he could ever remember having like an existential crisis in his life. Because of all things, I'd just seen the Barbie movie actually, and one of the little through lines of that was Barbie having an existential crisis. And it reminded me of the time when I was about 18 to 22. That was the first time I'd ever really contemplated death or truth or any of these kind of deeper philosophical concepts at a really visceral level, to the point where it's like, I'm going to bed every night and I'm just kind of petrified, staying awake, thinking about the fact that everything's impermanent. And everything you do or are or think or feel will inevitably disappear. But the happy end of that is, I got over that by about 20, and now I'm just quite happy and quite content with all that subject matter, despite the fact that I still find it very interesting. And what else I find very interesting is a lot of people are still going through that, or maybe wait until they're in midlife before those kinds of things hit them, which I find interesting because for me it was very early and then not as impactful, maybe. But that's a long-winded answer of saying that's kind of the theme of the song. Mm-hmm. Maybe exploring those deeper struggles and then the impact that has.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. So I do just have to ask a couple more questions about this song that I just fell in love with. So particularly the line, you run away, hide, you're losing your mind. This is the first part of the first chorus. And it speaks to that truth of losing your mind and the fact that we do have this tendency to first run and then hide when things get crazy. So I wanted to get a little personal here, and just for you, when things get crazy in your life, what do you do? How do you cope? Again, some will run and hide. What do you do when things get too crazy?
Yeah, I do exactly that. I like to isolate myself from other people. I mean, I like to do that anyway. So it's hard to tell what's a reaction and what's just my default state. But I definitely have the tendency to retreat inwards. That's definitely my particular coping mechanism, whether it's physically, and I do like to have my own personal space. But beyond that, I'm definitely more on the whatever traditional masculine kind of threat response to just kind of shut down. And I do have to actively kind of work against that a little bit, especially as a musician where you have to dive into those kinds of things.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, you're not alone in them. So many of us, I mean, again, your song just is something that I think so many people can relate to. So moving on to the second chorus, I love the line where it says, all your scars are not enough. I can't stand to give you up. And when I think about scars, I think about trauma and the truth of its existence. So, as you are a lover of introspection and observation, scars, that word scars, what's your take on it?
Well, obviously, it's a very useful metaphor that's often used, but at least in my case, this will not come through in camera at all, I don't think. But I have a lot of scars because my skin marks very easily. But most of them are happy scars, which I think is kind of a fun twist. Like this one I have here is just kind of a long scar running along my hand. I have a similar one on my knee. A lot of them come from playing with family dogs over the years. Not their fault whatsoever, just sharp claws. And I kind of roughhouse with my dogs and we run around, we're doing tug of war. A stray like nail here or there will like just nick my skin. And because it marks so easily, it'll leave like this very long, clean white line. But I actually find them like they're just happy memories. They barely hurt at the time. I mark really easily. Even my less pleasant scars, like I've had to have knee surgery a couple of times. I've got the classic boy scar of falling off my bike flat onto my face. But I don't know, I find something a little bit fun. It's almost like an old photo album for me to just kind of stand in front of the mirror sometimes, like if I'm popping in or out of the shower, not to be too sexy, but I can just see all these like horrible kind of looking scars, but they're still kind of enjoyable to me. So I like the fact that not all scars have to be sad necessarily. But of course, the line in the song is playing off the fact that we can even be attached to kind of, like you said, emotional scars in an unhealthy way.
Yeah, I will say, I don't think I've ever heard scar and happy in the same sentence. So I love that you're sharing your scars this way. And while it hurt for the moment, it was the beautiful thing that it stems from. That's your memory, not the ouch of it. Okay, just one more question about the song. So it comes at verse 2, and the bleeding from your nose, pulling at the stitches that keep you closed. I hear this and I think of times when healing is harder than hurting. And sometimes pleasing lies are easier to take than painful truths. I think about things like addiction, these kinds of things. But in terms of a musician, personally, what has been the hardest truth in your journey as a musician that you've had to face so far?
That's a good question. I got the question 5 minutes beforehand, and as I was reading it, I thought that is a good, and by that I mean difficult question. The first thing that came to my mind is maybe something that I don't know how common of a response this would be, but when you start making music, or at least when I start, I'll only speak for myself because I actually don't think this is the case for everyone. But I say you again, I started making music first out of a desire to please myself, of course, but then as more and more people start to listen, which is of course what you want, a key goal, you want your music to reach people and then you want them to enjoy it. The really interesting thing for me, and maybe the disappointing thing, although I've since kind of got over it, if you like, is that even when you get the response that you really think you want or that you've sought all this time, for instance, you may have someone message you and say, I love this song, it meant a lot to me, that kind of thing, which is all you want when you start making music. And I still want it. But what you realize is the half-life of that is very, very short. It's almost like I've never been able to find a there, no matter how much the music feels satisfying to me or to another person. It all kind of evaporates. Everything's ephemeral. And I already kind of knew that, but it's another thing to experience it in the moment. And it's a strange thing. So I think, but that just leads you back around to looking for equanimity and satisfaction in normal things, because I do think there's no real there for me. For other people, maybe there is, but it's a similar thing to me when I'm on stage. It's like I enjoy playing, but I know there'll never be that moment where you're like, this is it, I've achieved everything. There's never that moment. Even, the best shows I've ever played, I was like, that was good. And then the next morning I'm eating breakfast and I think no more of it. It's just everything kind of you can't hang on to those moments. So maybe that's the harshest truth.
Yeah, when you say, right, because we're all saying, oh, but when I make it, when I get there, but there is, like, to your point, there's no there. So
yeah, there isn't. Not that I found.
it's kind of
but you do it anyway. That's the true lesson. You do it anyway.
yeah, you do it anyway. So one more question I did have for you today is to help other folks along. And so when it comes to the music industry, or any industry really, there are so many paths to take. Many are right, but just as many are wrong. So for those who are pursuing a career in music, what advice do you have for not only finding your path, but staying on the right one?
Well, I was a lawyer first, very briefly, very apathetic law student before I started making music full time, but I was doing it on the side all the time. So I guess if people have something that they really want to do, I was far too cautious to jump straight into it. But presuming people are on some kind of creative path, I think the best value I can offer is having made many mistakes myself, and to the other musicians I've spoken to in my orbit, friendship circle, whatever, the best advice I've given them is to not stress too much about even quite big decisions, because I feel like I've made a lot of both good and really bad decisions. Like, I don't think you have to make or take rather the right path all the time, because I definitely haven't. But you can just kind of, through persistence and through making what you want to make, it doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't matter if you go off in some direction that feels, completely foreign to you, or you sign with someone that you shouldn't have. Like, I really feel like you can just keep moving forward, and it's not going to ruin your life like you think at the time, or it's not going to upset the apple cart to the extent that you can't do what you want to do. So I've always, to sum it up succinctly, I would just say there is no one right path, and even if you take the wrong path, you can always go back. That's what I've done.
I love that. So it's not so much the path you take, but just recognizing that a correction needs to be made and sort of recharting. Yeah.
It goes back to what we said before. Like, I don't think there is a perfect path, and there is no there, and you just keep going if you want to, and if you enjoy it.
Oh man, cheers to know there. There's some kind of comfort in that, strangely. To know.
I think there is. I mean, for me at least, but I do think it is different, perhaps for some people, or at least maybe their threshold is higher. I think, like, for instance, some people will really enjoy performing, even if there's, say, there's two people in the room, they don't care, they just love performing. As an example, for me, performing is fantastic, but I've never been a performer in the sense that just performing in and of itself is like fills me up, and I need the satisfaction of being on stage or something. For me, it's more just about the music itself. But I do think there's a little bit of different preferences for different people.
As well, there should be, I suppose. Well, thank you so much again for taking this time, sharing this story. Looking excited to have you in the States in November. Really excited about Chicago, as that's closest to us. So we'll see about making that happen.
Chicago is beautiful.
Yeah, for sure. And you'll be getting there in November. Cold. Yeah, I was going to say. Now, Chicago in July is a little bit different than Chicago in November, but good people. So thank you so much for taking this time. Again, excited to have you stateside.
Thanks for the good questions.
Yeah. Thanks for the great answers. And thank you for helping all of us become a little bit more aware now. Thank you so much.
No worries. Congrats on all your success. I'm happy to see you doing well.
Thank you so much. Same to you.
Bye.
Bye.